Okay, so then let's get going. Find my pieces of paper here. Okay, so last time we did linking. We started with linking and we didn't get all the way through. So we're going to finish that today. And what I'll do is I'll go through and remind us how far we'd come, and you can help me do that. Okay, so we'll go back to, I'll put it up here, linking, or as it's better known, mapping theory. And as I told you last time, what I'm teaching you is the standard version, the very standard version that's mainly out of Joan Bresna's 2001 book. But since we're also thinking about doing projects or doing term papers on this, I might as well tell you there's some newer work on this linking theory, mainly by Anna Kibort. She's been trying to develop a new version that stays relatively close to what there is already. But in a succession of papers, she's been looking mainly at Polish. So if you're interested in that. And then there is some effort by Asude and some co-authors where he's trying to get rid of linking theory as we know it and replace it by a more semantic, pragmatic approach. This involves a heavy use of formal semantics. So if anybody's really into lots of lambdas and, yep, back there, this is for you. I think it's a very interesting topic actually, because linking theory, the way I'm teaching it to you, is very attractive. It works fairly well for a number of examples, but it has limitations, which is why people are still working on it. And Anna Kibort is trying to save it, just trying to think about it in a little bit different way, but basically keeping to the spirit of it as it was developed. And they're just trying to do a completely different thing. So there's a lot of stuff to do as well. Myself, I've got a version where I also look a lot at case marking. And I should say but and king. So we've developed a version where we take case marking into account as well. So that also stays with the binary features. It tries to redefine them a little bit and to interact with case marking. So if that interests you, you could look at that as well. So there's several people working on this. Okay, keep it in mind if you're interested in this kind of stuff. There's lots of things you can read about, write term papers on. Okay, so, but getting back to the standard theory. So, I've been talking about binary features. You remember we had two binary features. What were they? Plus minus O, plus minus R, and this stands for objective and semantically restricted. And these features can be thought of as the glue, sort of as the glue between thematic roles, semantic roles, and grammatical functions. Okay, so what the trick is that mapping theory wants to do, it wants to relate thematic relations or thematic roles to grammatical functions. And this came up last time, and it wasn't quite clear, but I tried to explain it. What you do is you classify both the thematic relations and the grammatical functions via these binary features, and then you can match them up. That's the basic idea of mapping theory. So how did we classify our grammatical functions? I'll start with subject. Minus O, minus R. Then the next one, I'm just checking something. Object was plus O, because it's an object, minus R. Okay, because both of these grammatical functions minus R, because they can appear with a whole range of thematic relations. One is not an object, the other one is. Then an oblique theta. Let's do that one first. That one is what? Plus, minus O plus R, so not an object, but semantically restricted. That's what the plus R means. And then the other big one we have is object theta, which would be plus O because it's an object, and plus R. Okay, and I've written these in this order for a particular reason. You can see that it goes from sort of less marked, minuses everywhere, to most marked, pluses everywhere. And actually linking or mapping theory assumes a partial ordering of these grammatical functions. Okay, if you want to read about this, this is Bresnan, page 30, and my memory is going, page 309. Okay, that's where you have more information on this. This partial ordering becomes important for the mapping algorithm itself. Okay, so for one, we have this classification, and then we had this mapping algorithm. I'll go through that again. And I didn't tell you about this bit last time. So this bit is also important, that you assume that there is an ordering between these. And these are ordered the same because you can't tell which one is more marked or not. One has a minus, the other plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, about the same type of thing. Okay, so we have a partial ordering of grammatical relations. What else did we have? We had a classification of thematic roles, of theta roles. And there we had a fairly simple thing. It's the beauty of this mapping theory that it's fairly simple. It said patient-like roles get a minus. Which one was it? A minus R. Yep. Then secondary patient-like roles. These tend to be beneficiaries or experiencers in many languages. Patient-like roles got plus O. And then you have an elsewhere case, everybody else. It's very language dependent, so this classification is quite vague, and you can decide from language to language what you think they are. So beneficiaries, experiencers, several kinds of undergoers. Okay, and the other roles are minus O. And I'll show you examples. We'll go through some examples. I'm intending to show you examples from Icelandic, German, English, and Chichewa, so you can see how this actually works, the system. Okay, so we have this. Okay, now what else do we need? We had the mapping principles. Okay, so this is one thing. That is one thing. Mapping principles. What were the mapping principles? So I'll just say highest minus O role is mapped to subject. Okay, I'm abbreviating it somewhere. Else minus R role goes to subject. Okay, that's what we had last time. And then what I didn't tell you last time is, so we just did these two. The other roles, there could be other roles as well. Other roles, and this is a bit complicated, but we'll see how it works. Lowest compatible grammatical function on GF hierarchy. Whereby with GF hierarchy, I mean this one, this partial ordering. Okay, make sure I got it right. So lowest compatible one, meaning the lowest one that's compatible with the features. Okay. There's also a subject condition. Each predication should have a subject. It's debatable whether this is true for all languages, but that's in there. Subject condition, okay. And then there's one more thing. Which I'll put on the side. It turns out to be important. It's called the asymmetric object parameter. Object parameter. And the way this is written, it says you can't have two thematic roles that are minus R. And they first came up with this from evidence from Chichewa. So the idea is that you can't have a configuration that looks like this. The star means here forbidden. Okay. And that is something that languages can decide to set. So the assumption that Joan Breslin has is that English has this, Chichewa has this, the Bantu languages tend to have this. And the examples we're going to use, we're going to go through actually use this as well. Okay, I think that's all we need for the simple examples. Questions so far? Well-formedness, what was the well-formedness condition? It's a question about well-formedness that that's assumed, no, that's, so well-formedness conditions, you mean the coherence and completeness conditions?
No, subject condition and function argument.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I wasn't going to write that down. So there's two conditions, the subject condition, each one needs a subject. And then there's another condition that you mentioned, the function argument by uniqueness condition. I'm not going to put it on here because I actually don't believe in it. Okay, and that condition says, yeah, So the condition is that if we have a number of arguments, agent, patient, or something like that, then each of these should be linked to one and only one grammatical function, which makes sense at first glance. But I worked on complex predicates, and what I have there is I actually have things that look like this at the end. Agent, patient, with another argument structure. And I actually proposed something by which arguments fuse. And as soon as you have something like this, the function argument by uniqueness condition goes out the window, because you actually have two thematic roles that are mapping to just one grammatical function, okay? So it's a useful condition because you're trying to make sure that whatever is mapped, whatever is here is mapped onto something here. That needs to be done. But it doesn't work on a one-to-one way the way it was originally conceived of, okay? Which is why I didn't put it on the board. Okay, other questions? It's also a good area to look at. Complex predication, if you're thinking about term papers. Complex predication involves the composition of one or more argument structures. This is the way I write it. This is a shorthand version of it, actually, but there's lots and lots of literature on this. Okay, let's see. Now, last time we did passive, yeah? A simple transitive and a passive. I won't go through that again. What I'll go through now is an unaccusative and an unergative, and then we'll go through some more examples. Okay, an unaccusative is something like, I'll take the example that Joan has. I'll take fall. And one generally thinks that fall has one argument, yeah? And that this argument is some kind of a theme or patient argument. And we went through this last time, so these are the ones that do not get agentivity marking in languages that have agents, etc. These are the ones in German that take the be auxiliary, sein, whereas the unergative one would be things like laugh. And there the general idea is that this has an agent argument role. So in German it takes the haben auxiliary, the have auxiliary. In languages that have agentive marking, like the ergative, it takes the ergative. Yeah. So that's the idea. And many theories struggle with these quite a bit. In LFG it works out very, very simply. What you do is you say this one has a what? Minus R. This one has a minus O. So you get at the difference between these two types of verbs at the level of argument structure, but when you then link to grammatical functions, here's your mapping principles. Highest minus O, we don't have one. Else the minus R goes to subject, good. Highest minus O gets mapped to subject. So at the level of functional structure, these look exactly the same. They're just an intransitive verb with a subject. At the level of argument structure, there's a difference. And then you can derive the differences in behavior with respect to auxiliary selection and case marking and whatever else there might be from that. Is that clear? In LFG, it looks really easy. People have written papers about this since the 80s, worrying about how to do this. Yeah. Here it seems very easy. Okay, now let's take something more difficult, where every time I try to explain this, I make a mistake. Let's hope I don't make a mistake. So let's look at ditransitives. These are ones with 3 arguments. And the let's start with German. That's quite simple, I think. Okay, so let's do a German example. So the German example would be something like die Kinder geben dem Popcorn. Okay, there's a monkey mountain near here, monkey hill near here, Affenberg. And this is what you do. You give the monkeys popcorn, and they may or may not steal your lunch. Okay, so this is children. The children give the dative monkey, dative, and then popcorn. Okay, so the children give the monkey popcorn. So what do we have here? We have a verb, geben. And what does it have? What would you say? An agent. Somebody whispered, an agent. That's this one, right? That's the agent. A goal, that's the monkey. Could also think of it as the beneficiary, since he has he benefits from getting popcorn. Well, maybe not. Okay, and the last one. Theme. Something. Okay. So now, agent is minus O, theme is minus R. What is goal? Yeah, we could say it's a secondary patient-like thing, and then it gets a plus O, right? Okay, now let's see if this works out. So then we do our mapping principles. The highest minus O role goes to subject, is linked to a subject. Other roles, we don't do this else. Other roles, the lowest compatible grammatical function on the grammatical hierarchy. So let's try this one. Plus O. The lowest compatible function is this one. Object theta. Minus R, the lowest compatible function is object. And in fact, that is what we want. Okay? So this is the subject, this is the indirect object, object theta, and this is the object. And you can check whether you've got the right object by trying passivization. So you can try to pacify the sentence, and it should be that you have Popcorn wurde dem Affen gegeben von den Kindern. Yeah, that's okay. So you can check for that. Okay, questions about that? Okay, so the question is about the passivization test. You can also say, dem Affen wurde Popcorn gegeben von den Kindern. In German, one subject has a subject-verb agreement, so try putting one of those into the plural. So if you say, den Affen wurde Popcorn gegeben, that's good. But den Affen wurden Popcorn gegeben is bad. So if you put the monkeys into the plural, if it's the subject, there should be plural, the verb should be plural as well, and that doesn't happen. What's confusing about German is that it has free word order, so you can have the subject anywhere. Okay? Is that clear to everybody? The non-German speakers as well? Yeah, okay. Hungarians too? Good. All right. So now, so that's German. German is quite straightforward in this case. Now let's look at English. Okay, the example Joan uses in her book is cook for, first cook. The parents cooked supper. Okay. Cooked supper. Then parents cooked supper for the children. And the same thing, but the parents cooked the children's supper. Okay, so what Joan assumes is that you start out with a basic, so this is a transitive case, right? So you have cook. This should be routine for us now. We have an agent and a patient, minus O, minus R, subject, object. All set. The second one, she's assuming this is an adjunct. Okay, because you can cook, or you can cook for somebody, or you can cook somewhere, or whatever. So she's just assuming that this one will follow from this. That's just an adjunct. This one, she can't do that same way because there's clearly two arguments here. This is syntactically the object in English. Okay, and this is not an adjunct by any means. So what do you do? What she assumes, I find this a bit confusing, but she calls this the cook for version, the ditransitive version, even though there's no for in there. And what she says, it's a bit, there's something called applicatives, by which you can add an extra argument. Many, many languages do this. You add a preposition and then you add an argument, or you add a bit of morphology to the verb and you get an extra argument. What she's assuming is that what happens in this extra cook for, you get this imaginary for, is that you get an extra argument added. And now I have to be careful. So she says she doesn't actually do, she just does X, Y, Z. But so there will be a beneficiary here. I tend to call it goal for simplification, but it doesn't matter, they're on the same place, and a theme. Okay, and now this is minus O, this is minus R. And unlike in German, where we did the plus O, and that seemed to make sense to us, she is assuming for English that this thematic role is also patient-like and not secondary patient-like. Now you can fight with her about her assumptions, but the fact is if you treat it like in German, it's going to go wrong. We can try it out. You can try it out at home. So what she says is this is actually also a patient-like argument. And then we have this configuration, which, according to the asymmetrical object parameter, is not allowed in English. So then what happens is that the lowest one of these things, that's not allowed. So you could say, well, go home then. We're not allowed. But what she assumes is that in order to avoid this situation is what you do is the lowest one in the argument predication actually moves to plus O. Okay, so in the end, if I've done it right, it all works out. But you can already see, at least I think this is the case, that for German it works just fine. For English ditransitives, it's not looking that elegant, which is why people are tinkering. Okay, so in her book it works out well, but you can worry about is this the right assumption? Should it be this one that goes to plus O? Why not this one? Because this one feels more like a secondary patient-like whatever patient-like thematic role. Yeah. So you can raise these kinds of analytical questions. Okay, but now let's try to see how this works out. If we have this configuration, then we're okay. This one is subject. Minus R gets mapped to the lowest compatible one, that's the object. And plus O gets mapped to the lowest compatible one, that's the object theta. And this works out well for this sentence. So we have the parents are the agent, they're the subject. The children need to be the object, they're the beneficiary. And the supper is the secondary object in this case. Okay, so it works out. Okay, so what happens when we passivize? Let's go through that. Beneficiary minus R, theme plus O. When we passivize, we suppress this bit, or we make it be an obl. We'll just suppress it for now. So that means we need to link the other two. So what happens? Highest minus O role, no longer available, else minus R goes to subject. And the other one goes to the lowest compatible one, which is this. So that's what the theory predicts. And we can look at the examples. What would they be? The children were cooked supper. That works. By the parents. And how about this? Supper was cooked. The children by the parents. Which one's good? Are both good? Any native English speakers here? So native English speakers will say, yeah, anybody? The first one is definitely good. And the second one is, you wouldn't say that in English. And that's exactly what this predicts. Okay, that you should be able, this is the one that will become subject, not this one. Okay, and I'll do the next one as well. Okay, there's another constraint that came out of the work actually on Bantu languages first, which is called the, let's see, make sure I get the right name for it. We call it unspecified argument deletion. And that generally applies to themes. You see that a lot in languages, whereby something with some kind of minus specification, mainly this one has been shown in work, can be deleted. Okay, and there's so the idea is for things like cook, you can say I cooked the dinner, or you could just say I cooked. And you find that in language after language after language, where if it's something that you can expect from the lexical semantics of the verb, you can drop it. Okay, so now if you have it this way around, if we have the one that we have there, let's see. Okay, so you can say sentences like, we'll cook for Thanksgiving, which is coming up day after tomorrow, or for the children. That's good. Okay, and it's understood that you're going to cook something. So that would be this constellation. Cook, agent, theme, we cook something, minus O, minus R, whereby this thing can be dropped. Okay? How does this work? But if you have this constellation, minus O minus R plus O, and you try to drop the theme, okay, so we don't have the passive, but we have, what did we have? Subject, object, object theta, and now you have we'll cook children supper. Now you say, well, just as I did here, we'll cook something, we'll cook supper for the children. I would like to drop this. That doesn't work, right? Because you can cook the children, but it's not in the meaning of we'll cook for the children. Yeah. So that's also predicted by this linking, where you can now drop this, you can drop the beneficiary, that would be okay. So you can say we'll cook turkey, and you leave open for whom you're cooking turkey, but you can't actually do that one. So there's a whole bunch of nice things that follow from this analysis. Okay? Yeah, question?
If you have general rule of the unspecified argument, how are you going to explain the difference between verbs that allow for it and verbs that don't allow for it? It just sort of follows from the minus R minus O distribution.
Okay, so the question is, if you just have unspecified argument deletion, how do you actually constrain it? And that is a good question. So the general assumption in mapping theory is that you don't. You always allow it for the languages that allow it for anything that's unrestricted. But the real answer is probably that you need to have it there as in principle as something that can happen, but then link it to the lexical semantics of the verb in a more complex way. And that hasn't been worked out yet as well, as far as I know. Okay? Okay, other questions about this? Okay, so I have another example from Icelandic, which is similar. It basically makes the same point. The question is, are you guys into Icelandic? Should I go through that again, through this kind of linking theory? Would it make sense? With another example that's similar? Okay, so let's look at that. So the reason Icelandic is a very famous language in LFG. There was a very early paper from 1984, I think, or 83, which looked at Icelandic case marking, and it was the first one to establish that you could have subjects that were not nominative. You could have dative subjects, genitive subjects, all kinds of subjects. So Icelandic is very famous because it was the first language in which that was established by formal syntactic analysis. It was very well done. And within LFG, it was an LFG type paper. It was also one of the first papers that started to articulate linking theory. Very, very early. 1985 was the paper. Okay, so we have examples like this. I'll have to write all these strange Icelandic. I was in Iceland once and they had Thorn Day. They celebrate this letter. Okay, it's not a long sentence. This is you, this is the subject, straightforward nominative subject. This is wished, and this is her, dative, and this is this. For some reason it's genitive in this version of Icelandic. And the Germanic speakers, what is this probably? I'll let you guess. It's a Germanic language. Nope, it's not accusative. It's an auxiliary. It's your have auxiliary. Yeah. See, du, this, all completely Germanic here. You have wished this on her. Or for her. Okay, so let's see. Okay, we're linguists who have been sent to Iceland. We have to analyze this now, so what do? The verb is oska, however you pronounce it. What is its predicate argument structure? Yeah, what? Experiencer. For wish, yeah, but this is not, you were saying this is an experiencer. This person is not really experiencing stuff. They're doing something. Yeah. So this you would have an agent. Then what? So you can there's a version in which you can have this in or not. So they're assuming, this is maybe written in a bit strange way, but they're assuming there's a 2-place version with 2 arguments, or there's a 3-place version. Okay? So in the 2-place version, it would be just you wished this, which would be some kind of theme. And the 3-place version would be, you can think about that, so an agent. Theme and beneficiary. But according to the thematic hierarchy, which I don't have on there, the beneficiary has to be here. And then the theme has to be here. Okay, so now this linking is fairly straightforward, right? It works the way we've seen many times now. Subject, object. This one is again more interesting. What do we do with this? Not minus r. Yeah, if we try minus r, it's actually not going to work out. But it's well, no, actually, we have several options here, right? We could try minus r. We could try plus o. I'll give you some more data, and then you can decide for yourselves. Some more Icelandic data.
Is the asymmetric object parameter just for English, or?
No, you can decide. You can. It could be for more languages. Okay, I'll give you some more data, and then you can figure it out yourselves, hopefully. So this works in Icelandic. This means this was wished. That's okay. Okay. This is bad. This was cut. Henny, you cannot do this. And this, okay, wait, I have to say what this means. Although you should know this. This was wished her dative, so this was wished for her, on her. And then this one is good. Henny var was cut. This. That one is also good. Her dative was wished this. Okay, this is actually a fairly complex example. So this one is the passive of this. right? That seems fairly straightforward. So if we just have the transitive version, you have this was wished, no henny, and then it can be the subject. So the old object becomes a subject. Okay, now what do we do about this? If we have the henny here, the object cannot be the subject. But who's the subject? It's actually this one. So I should tell you this too. So in this case, this is the subject. And this seems to be, and this is the object by all the tests that you have in Icelandic. Verb agreement, and they have a number of tests that are also in this famous paper by Zanen, Mailing, and Thrainson from 1985. They go through a bunch of tests showing you what is a subject. Okay, so what do we do? How do we get that? So should we do this option? Should we do that option? What are we going to do? Linguistic analysis is needed. We can maybe work in a sense backwards, yeah?
Well, when we say that henny is the subject in the passive sentence, it has to be minus R. Because just with minus R you can have this subject.
Right, very good, yeah. So if we look at this data and we say, okay, the passive of this, if we're taking the passive of this is no longer available. The data seem to show that henny in this case is going to link to subject. And subject is minus O minus R. So it'll never happen if we have this feature specification. That's not going to work out. So it'll happen quite nicely if we have this feature specification with a minus R. Okay? But then we have this minus R here. So if we have two minus R's here in principle, then this could also be a subject. So this should be good, but it isn't. So what seems to be happening in Icelandic, we can conclude, is that what's also happening is the asymmetric object parameter, by which this then is not around, but we do plus O, just like in English. The lowest thematic role becomes plus O because of the asymmetric object parameter. And then we have this type of linking. So in this case, that would then not be the subject. It would have to be an object theta. And actually, since this is a genitive, it's not the standard object, so it makes sense for it to be an object theta as well. Whereas if it's a non-standard case marking, it often means that there's some kind of semantic restriction. So in this case, it also makes sense. Okay, so then we have subject, object theta. That would be this. This situation can never occur because this thing can never link to a subject, so that's ruled out. And the normal sentence we can get as well. That would be subject, object, and object theta. Shall I write that one down? So I'll write that one here. So if we're trying to get this one with a three-place predicate, we would have agent, beneficiary, theme. What did we say? This one is minus R, but that gets moved to plus O because of the asymmetric object parameter. And this one becomes the object. and this one becomes an object theta. Okay, and that accounts for the three-place version. You, her, this. Some skeptical looks. So the Zenon, Mailing, and Thrainson paper, 1985, as I said, was the beginnings of linking theory. They didn't have these features yet. They had what they call universal mapping principles, which they spelled out in words. So an interesting project would actually be to recast their analysis in modern linking theory, if somebody's into Icelandic. Because you could also bring in the case information, etc. So it's a non-trivial project, but it would be an interesting project to do. Okay, I'm ready to move on to Chichewa. Are you guys ready? Okay. Okay, so Chichewa, like I said, a lot of this linking theory was came up during a big Bantu project in which Chichewa was one of the languages they looked at. And where's the example? And there's something that Chichewa does, which is called locative inversion. This is the kind of lexical alternation that I asked you guys to look at in the homework. And here's the example. Okay, so let's see. Chichewa. Cool. Let's see. Unfortunately, you have to go to this side. Okay. Now, what's the gloss? Okay, anybody knows Chichewa? No? Okay, this is visitor. This is past tense. And this is village. And then we have all these other morphemes. So it's basically those visitors came to the village. Okay, where's come? Something's wrong with my thing here, but this is come. And then we have a whole bunch of other stuff in there, which Chichewa is one of those languages that, hang on, I have to, there's something wrong with my glossing there. So I have to look for it here. Okay, so this is a class marker. It's 2, and this is also 2. Those. Chichewa doesn't have, well, it has gender, but it doesn't do boring things like we do, feminine, masculine, and neuter. It actually has several class markers. I'm not quite sure how many, but there can be up to 12 or 15 in these Bantu languages. And they used to stand for something like animates, vegetables, stuff like that. But nowadays they just number them. And the way you can tell what is the subject is that the verb has on it one of these class markers which says, I'm agreeing with class 2. So visitors are class 2, and the village is actually class 17 and something with 3. Okay. So this is how you know this is the subject. So let's look at the other one. It's that's one of the subject-verb agreement ones. Okay, so with us we do third person singular, etc. They do it by class marker. So this is a subject marker, and it's saying class 2 is my subject. My subject is of class 2. Okay, now let's look at the other one. There's another sentence. Ku muzi. How do you say this? Ku. And then you have, okay, so it's all the same words, a little bit different morphology. And let's gloss some of this. So this is still 17.3, village. This, now you can see it's the same one. This is 17, and this is the subject, and this is come. Past, and this is 2 still, class marker 2, visitor, and 2 those, so those visitors. So unlike in English, where I can move the constituents around. I can say to the village came those visitors. That's a good thing to say in English. But visitors is still the subject. Okay, because you can, if you do subject-verb agreement, if you kinds of morphology you had, this would have to agree with visitors. Whereas in Chichewa, you can see that the verb is now agreeing with village, via this class marker. Okay, so how do you account for that? Goes back to a paper by Bresnan and Canever in 1809. What they propose is the following. Let's see, they say, well, we can think about the A structure again. So what is our, where? What does it have? It has 2 arguments. Now we can fight about what kinds of arguments they should be. But generally with these kinds of motion verbs, what's generally assumed, not just by LFG, but everybody who does lexical semantics, is that you have a theme and some kind of location. Okay, why a theme? If you remember the discussion I had about unaccusatives, etc., motion verbs, you can test it with German, tend to behave like unaccusatives. Okay? In German, ist irgendwo hingerannt, ist gekommen. It's always the be auxiliary. So they seem to have a theme or patient-like argument and not an agent. So you have that. And then the location, the locative is the village. That seems to make sense. So what do we do? Minus R. What is the locative? What does that get? A minus O. And then we go through our mapping principles. So the way this should actually read, if it's the highest role and it's minus O, it should be subject. That's not true. So then this is the subject. And this will be the lowest grammatical function. That doesn't work since it's minus O, so it'll have to be this one, and oblique theta. Okay, so that's for this sentence. But in principle, you also have a different mapping possible with this feature assignment. Right? This is also compatible with subject. And this is also compatible with an object. And that's the analysis for this one. Okay, so what's nice about these features is that they're fairly underspecified, and it's giving you space, it's giving you options. And the languages seem to use those options. The question is, when do we arrive at this option? And what Bresnan says is that what happens here is a type of focus construction. So what you do is you say this option is triggered in the focus construction. Okay, so then there's an extra constraint that says if there's focus, don't map this to subject, map that one to subject. That went too fast now, huh? Okay, but I think that'll have to be good enough for now. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Just back to the mapping principle. Did I get that right? If the highest row is minus O, then it becomes the subject.
Yeah.
But it's not the highest minus O row that becomes
Yeah,
the subject.
yeah. So I wrote this wrong. So if it's if highest row minus O, then it goes to subject. Okay, so the kinds of lexical alternations that I asked you to look in the homework, linking theory tends to, or mapping theory tends to be quite strong at those, because what you can do with these features, you can underspecify them in a way that then gives you two options. Okay, so in principle, if I write it again, there's this other option here that would say I could also be an object, and here the other option would be subject. And in this case, you would choose this one because of this, so you choose this one. In this case, you have an extra constraint coming in that says when this thing is in focus, then link it to subject, so pick this one. If you already have one subject, you have to have one subject, but you can't have more than one, then this option goes away, and that just leaves this object option. Okay? So it's a very flexible system, which can account for quite a range of phenomena. Okay, last chance to ask questions on this. Okay, so the next topic then, I'll now move into the next topic. We've done now mapping theory. What is next on the agenda is understanding PPs a little bit better. PPs are extremely complicated, prepositional phrases. Understanding them better from mainly from a functional structural perspective. And before I get into that, understanding PPs means we understand how adjuncts are done in LFG, and I am going to introduce that very quickly. And then we'll do PPs the next time. So far we've been talking all about arguments. And we have these grammatical functions. Now let's do adjuncts. And adjuncts can be all kinds of things in LFG. We treat them basically pretty much the same. Okay, adjuncts. So we've seen some adjuncts already. These were PPs, something like he cooked in the garden. This is generally considered to be an adjunct. It's not part of the core predication of cook, as we saw before. Cook is to place, or if you cook the children's supper. And you can have many more of these, right? You can say in the garden, under the tree, under the tree, in the shade. And you can keep going. Okay, so all these PPs are modifying the sentence. Other types of adjuncts. All of these are adjuncts. Adjunct. Other types of adjuncts. Cooked. Small, delicious, red. What's small, delicious, and red? Apples. Okay, adjunct. And just like with the PPs, you can have many, many, many. And here are more adjuncts. So these are adjectives. These are prepositional phrases, and these are adverbs, of course. So those are some of the very standard types of adjuncts you would have. Okay, now what do we do about these? I'll do the adjectives and adverbs now, leaving the PPs for next time. Okay, so just to introduce the concept. So at C structure, it's very easy. Let me start with that first. At C structure, we would have something like IP, NP, pron, he, pron is pronoun. He cooked. Wait, how do we do this? VP. Be cooked. And then an NP, which has N as the head, that's the apples. And then we would have, maybe we could do an adjective phrase in which we have lots of adjectives. What did we have? Small, delicious, red.
It's like a metaphor, yes.
Is there metacategory S or?
Is it like because it can be,
This adjective phrase?
yes.
So it's yeah. It's a bit odd because an NP will only always have one head. That's what you're asking, okay? But with these, yeah. So it's basically it's the maximal projection of these adjectives, except that you have many of them. Okay, so that's what a C structure would look like. If you are confused about C structures or F structures, I'll show it to you next time. I was intending to do it this time, but I'll show it to you next time. Remember, there's always this Ines XLE website. They have big grammars on there for German and English. You can go and type in any sentence. I showed it to you once. It's linked up on the webpage. You can go and type in more sentences and see what kind of tree structures come out, etc. Okay, so we would do something like this for a C structure. Wow, let's do an F structure. Okay, F structure is where the action is in LFG. So what do we have? We have, you can help me with the first part of it, or some part of it. We would have a pred, and what would that be? Cook. And it would have a subject and an object. Okay, and now you know how the subject and object is arrived at, because you have linking theory before that. Agent, patient, mixed subject, object, then you're an F structure. The subject is a pred pro, and number is singular, person is 3, gender is masculine. Okay, that's the he. The object is apples, or apple. Number is plural in this case. Person is 3. Gender, it doesn't have a gender. Oh yeah, we need case. Case is nominative. Case is accusative, even though you can't see it in English. Okay, so far so good. Now what do we do with the adjectives? What we do with the adjectives is we say, well, they are adjuncts. Okay, and they modify apple. And you put them into something called an adjunct set. I'll write that later, which can have many things in it, infinitely many. So what do we have? We have small. I'll just abbreviate this. We have delicious. And we have red. Okay, we could have more. These curly brackets show that it is a set. Okay, so whenever you have these straight brackets, these square brackets in LFG, you have one attribute with one value. Whenever you have an adjunct or the set notation, you can have several items in there of the same type. That's how you deal with sets. That's how you do with adjuncts. And the adverbs work the same way. They would then modify the verb. So you could put in an adjunct set for the verb. Getting a bit messy. Where you had in pred, what did we say, very? Just actually, I have it actually quickly, is that. And this one is again modified by an adjunct, which would be very. Because very is modifying quickly, right? And then okay, so that's what it would look like at F structure. And we'll do more and more of these examples. Okay. What the semanticist should want to know is, how do we know scope? Which adjective scopes over the other adjective? In some cases it makes a difference, with these ones it doesn't. But you have examples like is it the former alleged criminal versus the alleged former criminal. So you have examples like this which go through the literature where it makes a difference in which order the adjectives appear. So what LFG does is it actually allows you at the level of this, it puts in a little scope marker at F structure, and I'll show you that more next time, where you can actually see at F structure which one preceded which other one. So there's actually two ways. You can either look at this and say, oh, I need to know the order of this, and then by the inverse projection, go look back at the C structure and say, oh, they came in that order. Or what they've done is a shortcut by which they actually notate in F structure saying which one came before which one. So you don't need to do the whole mathematical computation of going back and checking it out. But that's easiest to show you with actual examples on the computer, and I'll do that the next time. Okay, 1 minute for questions. Nope, okay, then we're done for today. See you next week.